All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something pretty cool,
Yeah.
open source physics.
Yeah.
And specifically, we're looking at how Singapore is using open source physics to kind of shake up science education.
Yeah. It's a really interesting and innovative approach,
Yeah.
and we're going to dig into wh- why that matters,
Yeah.
not just for Singapore, but kind of for the future of learning more broadly.
Absolutely. And the source material we're looking at today is it's a webpage about a presentation on
Yeah.
open source physics at Singapore, given at the 6th Singapore International Science Challenge.
Wow.
So picture this, a
Yeah.
whole room of educators from
Yeah.
top science schools all over the world talking about how to make physics
Yes.
more engaging.
It's a pretty big deal, and that Singapore International Science Challenge, or SISC,
Okay.
is a big deal. And this particular one had the theme "Connecting Minds,
Hmm.
Discovering New Frontiers."
Oh, nice.
And the focus was on using technology to create a smart globe.
I like it. I like it. That gives us some good context, I think.
Yeah.
But let's get to the heart of it. What exactly is open source physics at Singapore?
Yeah, so it's often called OSP at SG,
Okay.
short. It's a project by Singapore's Ministry of Education.
Uh-huh.
And the goal is pretty ambitious, right? It's using interactive simulations and modeling tools to kind of bring physics to life for students.
So it's not just reading textbooks and memorizing formulas. You're saying it's giving students a way to actually, like, experiment
Exactly.
with physics concepts.
Yeah, exactly. It's about like getting your hands dirty.
I like it.
And they're making it accessible to students on computers and mobile devices.
Oh, wow.
So imagine, no matter where you are, you've got like a virtual physics lab in your pocket.
Okay, that's starting to sound pretty cool.
Yeah.
But what makes this approach so innovative? Is it just about making physics more fun?
I mean, fun is definitely a factor, but OSP at SG goes deeper than that.
Hmm.
It's tackling some fundamental challenges in science education.
Okay.
And I think one of the big ones is visualizing abstract concepts.
Mm-hmm.
So think about things like gravity or the movement of electrons.
Hmm.
How do you show those to students in a way they can really grasp?
Yeah, I remember struggling with those concepts back in school,
Yeah.
for sure. So how does OSP at SG help students kind of get past that hurdle?
Through these simulations, they can actually see these invisible forces at work.
Okay.
I mean, it's one thing to be told how gravity affects a falling object,
Right.
but it's a whole other level of understanding when you can manipulate the variables in a simulation and see the results in real time.
Totally. So it's not just memorizing facts.
Right.
It's about building that intuition
Exactly.
and understanding. That makes sense.
And I think that leads to another key innovation of this,
Okay.
which is the focus on what they call student-centric pedagogy.
Okay.
And this is all about kind of shifting the learning process from passive to active. So instead of just absorbing information, students are experimenting, they're making predictions, they're testing their ideas, just like real scientists.
I'm seeing a pattern here. OSP at SG seems to be all about giving students the tools to take ownership
True.
of their learning.
For sure.
But how effective has it actually been? What's the impact been like so far, both in Singapore and maybe even globally?
Well, the webpage mentions positive feedback from both, Singapore and globally.
Okay.
But I think we need to dig a little deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
What's really interesting is this idea that OSP at SG is being used to develop what they call future-ready learners.
Ooh, future-ready learners.
Yeah, and these are students who can use technology effectively,
Right.
not just for physics, but for any subject, any problem they might encounter in life.
So it's about equipping them with a set of skills that goes beyond just physics knowledge.
Yeah.
That seems pretty valuable, especially in a world that's becoming increasingly digital.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And that brings us to the role of ICT, or Information and Communication Technology. This is at the core of OSP at SG's message, that digital literacy is no longer optional. It's like a fundamental skill set for the 21st century.
From what we've covered so far, it seems like Singapore is really on the leading edge of recognizing this.
Yeah.
But what are some specific examples of the resources that they're using to actually do this?
Right.
Like, the webpage mentions having hundreds of them.
Yeah, it's a really impressive collection, and it covers a wide range of topics.
Yeah.
Some of the titles really caught my eye.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
There's one called Antibiotic Resistance Dice Simulation.
Interesting.
I'm curious how they even approach that one.
Yeah, that sounds super relevant, especially with all the concerns about antibiotic resistance these days.
For sure.
And then there's Catch the Recyclables, an interactive recycling game in EJS.
Oh, wow.
It sounds like they're weaving in other important themes, not just sticking to pure physics.
Yeah, it's a good example of how they're trying to make the learning relevant to real-world issues,
Yeah,
and also shows how these simulations can be adapted to different subjects, right?
totally. Okay, so they've got the big picture stuff covered.
Yeah.
But what about the nitty-gritty physics concepts? What kind of resources do they have for those?
Oh, they've got plenty for those too.
Yeah.
So there are simulations for things like electric circuits,
Okay.
wave motion, and even one called the amazing pendulum wave effect.
Nice.
And all of this is available online and offline through apps and ebooks.
Wow, they seem to have thought of everything.
That's the beauty of these open source platforms. They're designed to be accessible
Yeah.
to everyone, regardless of their resources or location.
Okay, so we've established that OSP at SG is pretty cool, but this is the deep dive.
Yeah.
We need to go beyond just cool and really understand why this matters.
Right.
What's the better picture here?
Well, I think what's fascinating is that this goes beyond just Singapore.
Okay.
OSP at SG is part of a global trend in education,
Mm-hmm.
a shift towards this more student-centered learning, towards using technology to empower students rather than just lecturing at them.
So they're kind of paving the way for a whole new approach to education.
In a lot of ways, yes.
Mm.
And I think that raises a really big question for us.
Yeah.
If this is working for physics,
Mm-hmm.
what other subjects could benefit from a similar approach?
Hmm.
Could we be seeing the start of a revolution in how we teach and learn, not just in Singapore, but around the world?
Oh.
That's the question.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
That's a pretty thought-provoking question. It makes you wonder if we're on the verge of a major shift in education.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we get too lost in the future,
Right.
let's zoom back in on OSP at SGU. You mentioned earlier that it's part of a global movement.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Well, one of the things that makes this project so unique, I think, is the open source aspect of it.
Okay.
It's not just a program that was developed and is kept within Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
They've created a platform where educators from all over the world can collaborate, share resources, build upon each other's work.
That's a pretty big deal, right? I mean, education can be pretty siloed sometimes.
It definitely can be.
Mm.
But OSP at SG is breaking down those silos.
Mm-hmm.
And the webpage mentions some pretty impressive names
Oh, yeah.
who are involved. People like Professor Francisco Esquimbre,
Okay.
Friquan Huang, Wolfgang Christian.
Wow.
These are big names in physics education.
So it's not just a bunch of teachers throwing ideas around.
Right.
You've got some serious expertise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that expertise is shared through workshops and training sessions, both in Singapore and internationally.
Uh-huh.
So they're actively training teachers on how to use these simulations effectively in the classroom.
It sounds like they're really investing in making this a sustainable movement. It's not just a one-off project.
Exactly.
But how does this actually play out in a classroom? Paint me a picture.
So imagine walking into a physics class, and instead of rows of desks facing a chalkboard,
Right.
you see students kind of huddled around computers, their faces lit up with excitement.
Okay, I'm already picturing it. What are they doing?
They're launching virtual rockets, maybe designing roller coasters, or even exploring the inner workings of an atom.
Whoa.
So they're not just passively listening, they're actively engaged, manipulating simulations, testing hypotheses, collaborating with each other.
It's a far cry from the physics classes I remember.
I think for many of us, yeah.
So the teacher is more of a facilitator than a lecturer in this scenario.
Exactly. They're circulating among the students, guiding their exploration, answering questions,
Right.
encouraging them to think critically. It's a very dynamic learning environment
I like it.
where the focus is on learning by doing.
Right. And the best part is this kind of learning can happen anywhere, anytime.
Right.
Students can access OSP at SG resources from their own devices at home, in the library,
Yeah, exactly.
wherever. It's like they're carrying a physics lab in their pocket.
That's the beauty of it. It breaks down the barriers of the traditional classroom, right?
Totally.
And allows students to learn at their own pace, exploring concepts that interest them, revisiting material as needed.
This seems especially beneficial for students who might struggle with traditional teaching methods.
Yeah,
It feels like a much more inclusive approach.
absolutely.
Mm.
And it's not just about individual learning, it's also about collaboration.
Okay.
The platform encourages students to work together, share their ideas, test each other's hypotheses,
Right.
solve problems collaboratively.
It sounds like they're not just learning physics.
Right.
They're learning those essential life skills.
Mhm.
Critical thinking, problem solving,
Exactly.
communication, teamwork.
Precisely. OSP at SG
Yeah.
is preparing them for the real world, where these skills are essential, right?
Yeah.
There's a very holistic approach to education,
Yeah.
preparing students not just for exams,
Right.
but for life in a rapidly changing world.
It's inspiring to see how Singapore is really using technology to push the boundaries of education.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're truly creating a more equitable and engaging learning experience
Yeah, for sure.
for their students. But let's go back to that website for a minute.
Sure.
We keep mentioning all these amazing resources,
Right.
over 300 of them.
Yeah.
What are some that stand out to you?
Well, we've already talked about the antibiotic resistance dice simulation
Yeah.
and the recycling game. Both of those are great examples of how OSP at SG goes beyond just physics concepts and really addresses real-world issues.
Yeah, those are the ones that caught my eye too. It's like they're saying, hey, physics isn't just some abstract thing.
Right.
It's all around us and it's connected to some pretty important stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those simulations make those connections clear
Yeah.
and engaging for students.
What about some of the more, core physics concepts?
Sure.
What kind of resources do they have for those?
Oh, they've got a huge range.
Mm.
So, for example, there's one called AC or DC Appliances JavaScript Simulation.
Okay.
And it lets students explore the fundamentals of electricity. Build virtual circuits, test different components.
Yeah.
They can even observe how electricity flows, all in a safe virtual environment.
So even something potentially dangerous like electricity becomes this hands-on learning experience.
Exactly.
I like that.
And then there's Simple Electric Circuit, which probably covers the very basics.
Right.
And then another one called Amazing Pendulum Wave Effect,
Okay.
which sounds like it would be visually fascinating. And there's so much more. Over 300 resources, remember.
It's mind-boggling. And all of this is freely available to anyone with an internet connection. It makes you wonder why more schools aren't doing this.
Right. Well, I think there are probably a few reasons.
Okay.
Access to technology is one hurdle for some schools, but I think another big challenge is teacher training.
That makes sense. You can have the best resources in the world, but if teachers don't know how to use them effectively,
Exactly.
they're not going to have much impact.
And that's another area where OSP at SG shines, I think. They've invested heavily in providing teachers with the training and support they need to implement these new methods.
Okay.
So they offer workshops, online tutorials, even mentoring programs.
So it's not just about throwing technology at the problem. It's about equipping teachers with the skills and the confidence to use that technology effectively.
Absolutely. And that's crucial. The webpage even mentions that teachers who have gone through the OSP at SG training programs feel much more confident in their ability to teach physics using technology.
It sounds like a win-win situation. Teachers are empowered, students are more engaged, and ultimately everyone benefits from a more effective learning experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it highlights a really important point.
Okay.
As we move towards a more technology-driven education, we can't forget about the human element.
Right.
We need to invest in teachers, in training, in creating supportive communities where educators can share best practices and learn from each other.
It's a good reminder that technology is a tool, and it's only as good as the people who use it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to one of the key terms we've been discussing, future-ready learners.
Yeah.
We've talked about how OSP at SG helps develop these learners.
Right.
But what does that term actually mean in this context?
Yeah, it's a term we hear a lot, but it can be a bit vague. What are the specific skills and mindsets that make someone future ready?
Right.
And how does OSP at SG contribute to developing those?
Yeah, it's a big question, right? What does it actually mean to be future ready? Is it just about knowing how to code or use the latest gadgets?
I think it's definitely more than that. To me, being future ready is about having a certain mindset.
Okay.
A willingness to embrace change, a curiosity to learn new things, and the ability to adapt and solve problems in a world that's constantly evolving.
So it's not just about the skills you have today, it's about the skills that you're going to need to develop tomorrow.
Exactly.
How does OSP at SG fit into all of this? Well, think about all the skills that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, digital literacy.
Right.
These are all core components of being future ready.
And OSP at SG isn't just teaching those skills in isolation.
Right.
It's weaving them into the very fabric of how students learn physics.
Exactly. It's not just about memorizing formulas.
Right.
It's about understanding how to apply those formulas to real-world situations, how to analyze data, how to communicate your findings.
It sounds like they're preparing students for a future where the ability to learn and adapt is going to be more valuable than ever before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're doing it in a way that's engaging and accessible.
Yeah.
Which is crucial.
For sure.
Because the future isn't some exclusive club.
Right.
It belongs to everyone.
And that brings us to something that's been kind of a recurring theme in this deep dive.
Yeah.
Accessibility. We've talked about how OSP at SG makes physics more accessible to students with different learning styles.
Right.
But it goes beyond that, right?
Definitely. This open source approach has the potential to really level the playing field in education.
Oh.
So imagine a world where any student, anywhere, can access high-quality learning resources, regardless of their background or their school's budget.
That's a powerful vision. It makes you wonder why this hasn't been done sooner.
It's not always easy to shift away from traditional models, but Singapore seems to be ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
In recognizing that technology can be a powerful tool for equity and inclusion.
And they're not just talking about it, they're actually putting it into practice. They're investing in the infrastructure, the training, the resources needed to make this vision a reality.
And the impact is undeniable.
Yeah.
Right? Students are gaining a deeper understanding of science, they're developing essential skills, and they're feeling empowered to take ownership of their learning.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most innovative solutions are also the most practical.
Yeah.
You know, they're solving a real problem, and they're doing it in a way that's sustainable and scalable.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's where the open source aspect comes in.
Right.
Because anyone can contribute to this platform. It's constantly evolving, growing, adapting to meet the needs of learners all over the world.
It's like a global community of educators working together to build a better future for education. That's pretty inspiring, if you ask me.
It is. And it makes you wonder, what does the future hold for OSP at SG?
Yeah.
Will we see even more sophisticated simulations? Will other countries adopt similar models?
And maybe the biggest question of all, what other subjects could benefit from this approach?
Could we see interactive simulations for history?
Oh, wow.
Where students can walk through ancient cities or participate in pivotal events?
Yeah.
Or what about literature? Could we create virtual worlds where students can explore the settings of their favorite novels?
The possibilities are endless.
Yes.
It feels like we're just at the beginning of a revolution in how we teach and learn.
It's an exciting thought to leave our listeners with, because I think OSP at SG is a reminder that the future of education isn't something that just happens to us.
Right.
It's something that we create.
It's a call to action for all of us to think creatively, to embrace innovation, and to really work together to build a future where every student has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Well said.
Thanks.
And on that note, I think that's a perfect place to end.
Yeah, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of open source physics in Singapore.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've learned something new and maybe even feel inspired to explore some of these resources for yourself.
Yeah, until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in education.
All right, sounds good. I'm going to go play some physics simulations now, so.
Have fun.
See you later.